if you're naive enough, you kind of think, well, if you are an immigrant to the country, isn't it illegal to use welfare? It's not quite so easy as that. In fact, welfare use very high among immigrant households and definitely high among illegal immigrant households. For more on this, let's bring in Steven Camarota. He's the director of research for the Center for Immigration Studies, and he's got the information today. Steven, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, it is true that there are categories of welfare normally that, say, an illegal immigrant is not supposed to have access to, right?
That is true, yes.
But you have a report today demonstrating that despite those barricades, there's a lot of welfare use going on.
Yeah, what we find based on the survey of income and program participation, this is just government use data, is that 54% of all immigrant households use at least one of the major welfare programs. And they're actually using several at once, which is typical of most people who are on welfare. And I can explain how that is, but basically we also estimate that it's 59% for households headed by illegal immigrants and 52% for households headed by legal immigrants. So both groups are high.
Okay, so that's a massive number. And do you have a comparison to, American citizens, how that stacks up?
Yeah, it may shock you, but American citizens are also very high at 39%. So the immigrants have higher rates. The difference is statistically significant, but the rates for the U.S. born are by no means low.
No, lots of Americans on welfare as well. But those are Americans. Those are people who are in the country, and so that makes sense that if we're going to have welfare that would apply to American citizens. How is it that illegal immigrants in particular ended up tapping into our welfare system?
Yeah, well, they can receive benefits on behalf of U.S.-born children who have automatic citizenship and full welfare eligibility. There are also some programs like WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Nutrition Program, or free school lunch, that everyone can get. There is no test about whether you're legally in the country. In addition to that, there are a number of states specifically that give things like Medicaid and food stamps to illegal immigrants, even if they don't have U.S.-born children. And also, any illegal immigrant with work authorization, now I know this may surprise your listeners, but at a minimum, we've actually given Social Security numbers and work authorization to at least 2 million immigrants in recent years. And as a consequence, those individuals can and do at very high rates receive cash payments from what's called the Earned Income Tax Credit. So what happens is you work, you don't pay any federal income tax, and say for like a typical family of four, you get a check instead for often like $4,000, say.
In the form of what we normally think of as a tax refund?
Yeah, it's not a refund, though. You don't pay any taxes. You get all your money back if you paid any in, but then you get a cash payment from the Earned Income Tax Credit. So it is unambiguously a welfare program, although they call it a tax credit. It's not money you're getting back. It's just a cash payment.
Right. It's money that the taxpayers are giving to you, having not paid taxes.
That's right. But to be clear, we have no evidence this is being done fraudulently. There probably is some of that going on, but this is just self-reported. That's the thing to understand. The actual rates are higher. This is what people tell the government in the survey they're using. The actual rates, actually, as I say, are higher.
Yes.
But the point is, this is not cheating. They are allowed to do this. This is the way the system is designed.
So 59% of households led by illegal immigrants are receiving welfare payments from the United States. These are huge numbers. How does a government even plan ahead for something like this? I thought that the way the government operates is you budget for the year ahead, but we're having millions upon millions of people crossing our border every day. How do we even get ready for that?
Well, you're certainly right to wonder. In the long term, the decision, say, that the administration's taken just to release 2.7 million illegal immigrants in the United States at the border, that decision alone is going eventually to come with a big welfare cost to the American taxpayer. But since, anytime we are short of money at the federal level, we just borrow more. That's how this system works. These entitlements, they're simply funded. If you're eligible, you get the check. If you're eligible, you get the food stamps. If you're eligible, you can live in the public housing, and so on. So in that context, we just spend the money and then borrow it if we don't have it. And yeah, you're right. What's happening at the border has profound implications for the welfare system and taxpayers.
So, Steven Camarota, what is the size of the bill that Americans are paying for all of this welfare?
Yeah, so that is much more difficult to exactly calculate. These programs that we looked at, you can't look at all the programs. There are lots of others we're not able to discern from this survey. But these programs cost about $900 billion a year, and it's safe to assume that somewhere between 10 and 15%, maybe more, of the costs are going to immigrants, maybe 20%. So you could be looking at $150 billion minimum in welfare costs to immigrants overall, with maybe half of that or a third of it going to illegal immigrants. I mean, I think the key point here is, well, I want to tell your listeners one other thing. Most of these folks do work. That's not what's driving it. You can work and get all these benefits. I could explain how, but the way it works is if your income's low enough. So say you had a family of four with a mom and dad who both work and two kids, but if you make less than $40,000 a year, you can get WIC and free school lunch and Medicaid and live in public housing, and you would get the earned income tax credit. It's all based on income, not whether you work or not. People think welfare is just for non-workers. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Let me just say it this way. If you had to put this in a bumper sticker, there's a high cost to cheap labor. Bringing in immigrant workers does end up costing the taxpayer a lot of money if the workers are poor, at the bottom end of the labor market.
So when people are arriving here in the country, what kind of welcome packet are they getting from the Biden administration? Are they being directed to all of these welfare programs?
Well, people are being made aware. If you go to, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website, welfare is one of the things that it does introduce you to. But remember, once they arrive at the local level, there's every incentive for the local bureaucracy to get you signed up so that maybe you can get into public housing, to get you health care and things like that, particularly the children. And we understand why that is. We're a very humane, generous society. But that is the consequence. So there's a whole infrastructure in place to help immigrants, even newly arrived people, even people who are in the country illegally, to get access to these programs. And they are reasonably effective government bureaucracy at that.
Amazing. And what we're talking about is just the welfare component. It is not the impact that illegals have, for instance, on infrastructure or the extent to which we're paying for schooling for illegal immigrants. That's not what you're talking about here. You're talking about just broadly welfare programs.
Right. Public education would be one. We spend very, very roughly $15,000 a year per kid. So there are about 4 or 5 million children of illegal immigrants in public schools. So you can do the math there, and you could see how quickly that becomes a very large number, $100 billion, that kind of thing on public education. But again, most of those kids are U.S. born, the vast majority. See, that's the thing you have to understand. It's very hard to stop this from happening once you allow people into the country. People say, well, look, folks can come and get a job, but we just won't let them use the welfare. That was the idea of the 96 welfare reform law. But that can't happen. Not in our society, not with citizen children, not given the generosity, not given the political and practical realities. This is what happens. The very large fraction work but struggle to support themselves and their children, so turn to the American taxpayer.
But it's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle because what we've done is we've created an incentive structure for people to illegally immigrate into the country, knowing that on the other end, they're going to have an entire government apparatus that's dedicated to their well-being and giving them money, giving them welfare, giving them transportation, bringing them to the city of their choice. At that point, it's like, why not illegally immigrate to the United States? There's gold waiting at the end of the rainbow for me.
Yes, obviously, most immigrants don't come necessarily with the idea that they're going to get on welfare, but the programs that are available makes illegal immigration more attractive, and it makes it less likely people will want to go home. So again, most people don't come with the idea, hey, I'm going to sign up for these programs, but nonetheless, they become aware of it pretty quick. It is an attraction to some extent, and it's one of the reasons they don't want to go home, too. So, yes, you're right.
Is this, in terms of, there's some conversation about what it looks like if Trump becomes president and whether or not he'll actually be able to undertake an effort to deport people who are here illegally. By being on these welfare programs, is the government aware of who is illegal and who is not?
Well, technically, very often in the case of illegals, they don't keep track of that as it's a matter of policy, like for the WIC program, or it's the U.S.-born children who are getting it. So technically, the parents aren't getting it. So you can get food stamps and the temporary assistance to needy family program and cash from that. And you are not really the person getting it. The U.S.-born child is. But sure, could we use this administrative data to help us enforce the law? We probably could, but there are all kinds of reasons why that's difficult, including laws about confidentiality that make it very difficult to use the administrative data. I don't know that we need it. But what we'd have to start doing is just actually enforcing the law. Well, we'll see if that happens. But right now, I think what this reminds us is that there are a cascading series of consequences for society of tolerating widespread illegal immigration, and one of them is for the welfare system.
Yeah, big time. So, lastly, you're looking at just all these immigrants, illegal immigrants who are on welfare. What is the trajectory of all of these programs? How unsustainable is this arrangement?
Well, look, I mean, there's lots of things that's unsustainable about the federal government. So I wouldn't want to say that immigrants are the thing that's going to break the bank. But it's certainly true that, especially for programs like Medicaid, that, yeah, if you have a lot more low-income people that you've allowed into your country who can't afford health care, and so the taxpayer's paying for it, that is an area where we're going to see more and more strain on the federal government because of our immigration policies.
Yeah, and at the expense of our welfare obligations to American citizens, too. So it's just...
That's true, right. There's less we can do for our own poor. And by the way, the reason so many immigrants are poor is very simple. So many arrive in the United States with very modest levels of education. As I said, it's not because they don't work. They typically do work, and that's to their credit. But they have such modest levels of education on average that in the modern American economy, they just don't make much. And as a result, they and their children qualify for these programs.
Yeah, and their ambition gets them out of the country that they could be helping, which is the country of origin. Steven Camarota, thank you very much, again, with the Center for Immigration Studies for your findings, helping give us some more information on something. The media, very rarely want to dig into these issues, if at all. I'm grateful that you have. Thank you, sir.